On the July 13th, 2021 episode of NXT, Mandy Rose returned to the brand when she came out to watch the match between Sarray and Gigi Dolin. And along with Dolin, Mandy Rose would be joined by Jacy Jayne and they would form the Toxic Attraction. But before we go on, we need to talk about each of their individual stories, starting off with none other than Mandy Rose. Mandy Rose first appeared for the WWE in the 2015 edition of Tough Enough, and she had a really good showing on this Tough Enough series, finishing runner-up on the series, and though she didn't win the show, she would still be offered and accept a WWE deal, and she would sign for NXT and report to the Performance Center. And Mandy Rose would not last too long in the NXT process, no, not because she was fired, but because she was called up very quickly. She really didn't do much in NXT, she mainly just wrestled on house shows and was never really on television that much other than jobber appearances before she was called up to the main roster to join Sonya Deville and Paige as Absolution, a brand new trio on WWE television that formed at the tail end of 2015. Absolution wouldn't start off too strong though, they kind of lost and lost and lost. Mandy Rose and Sonya did get to be a part of the first ever Women's Elimination Chamber match, where they were of course the first two people eliminated. And on the Raw after WrestleMania 32, just 3 months after the team had debuted, Paige announced her retirement from wrestling, meaning she was out of the group, and Absolution had now just became a duo of just Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville, and they would go by the name of Fire and Desire. Fire and Desire kind of floated around as a mid-card women's team, and for the next couple of years they had some big wins here and there, including competing at Elimination Chamber 2019 in a match to crown the first ever women's tag team champions, where they finished runner-up. Also at that year's Fastlane event, she would face Asuka for the SmackDown Women's Championship, and she was also the original planned opponent for Asuka at WrestleMania for the SmackDown Women's Championship, before, you know, Charlotte Flair beat Asuka on a random SmackDown episode and took it to the main event. Fire and Desire would of course eventually break up in a feud that involved Otis, Dolph Ziggler, and the SmackDown Hacker. God, do you remember all that? That feels like years ago now, doesn't it? Just prime pandemic WWE. This would end with a match at SummerSlam 2020 in a loser leaves WWE match, which was won by Mandy Rose, and from here Mandy would stride on with her babyface run, and she'd begin teaming with Dana Brooke, and again they just sort of became a mid-card team. They challenged for the women's tag titles here and there, they had a match at Mania where Mandy slipped during her entrance, but overall, Mandy's babyface run as a whole just didn't really click that well, and she was much better suited at being a heel. And WWE, seemingly recognizing this, would bring her back to NXT as a heel once again, and as previously mentioned, she would come out to watch a Gigi Dolin match, a woman who would join her in Toxic Attraction. Priscilla Kelly, not Priscilla Kelly, made her wrestling debut in March 2015, and throughout her time in the indies, she'd wrestle under her real name of Priscilla Kelly, and she wrestled for various promotions all across the country and world whilst working the independent scene, working for various major promotions such as AEW, MLW, DDT, TJPW, Shine, and even competed in the WWE Mae Young Classic in 2018, where she lost to Deonna Purrazzo in the first round. Perhaps her biggest moment pre-WWE was when she got in heat with the rest of the wrestling world when she did a spot depicting a used tampon. I talked about this in a whole different video, we don't need to get into it here. She made a surprise appearance at AEW All Out 2019 in the Women's Casino Battle Royal before she was signed to the WWE on January 20th, 2021. And for her first few months in the brand, she was playing a babyface, floating around the women's roster with no real direction, until she came together with Mandy Rose. And the whole point of the trio at first is that Mandy Rose believed that she could help the other two, and the three of them together could become a force in the women's division. But hey, we've not even discussed the third member yet, Jacy Jayne. Jacy Jayne made her wrestling debut in 2018 in the Florida wrestling scene using the name Avery Taylor. She would wrestle mainly across the Florida wrestling scene and even had a women's title reign with WXW, and she would make her NXT debut on the September 23rd, 2020 episode, competing in a women's contender battle royal, of course losing it. It wasn't until February 24th, 2021 that she would officially sign with the WWE, and she wouldn't debut until July of 2021 under the ring name of Jacy Jayne, debuting in the July 20th episode, losing to Frankie Monet. Mandy Rose, Gigi Dolin, and Jacy Jayne would come together to form the Toxic Attraction. Gigi Dolin and Jacy Jayne would be the tag team of the group, with Mandy Rose being the single star of the group, and Gigi and Jacy would very quickly climb up the ranks of the NXT Women's Tag Team division to challenge Io Shirai and Zoe Stark for the titles. They would challenge them first on TV unsuccessfully, but then on the 26th of October Halloween Havoc episode of NXT, Jacy Jayne and Gigi Dolin would defeat Poja Peralta and Indy Hartwell, and of course the champions of Zoe Stark and Io Shirai, in a ladder match to win the NXT Women's Tag Team titles, bringing home the first bit of gold for the Toxic Attraction. And then on that same night, Mandy Rose defeated Raquel Rodriguez in a trick or street fight for the NXT Women's Championship, her first ever title win in the WWE, and Toxic Attraction now all held gold and had just taken over the NXT Women's division. They would begin feuding with the rest of the division, leading to them competing at that year's War Games, where the trio of them and Dakota Kai were defeated by the team of Cora Jade, Io Shirai, Kaylee Ray, and Raquel Rodriguez. And for the next, year, the Toxic Attraction, particularly Mandy Rose, were extremely dominant. Gigi and Jacy's tag title reign lasted until 4th of February 2022, when they lost the titles to Dakota Kai and Raquel Rodriguez at Stand and Deliver. Luckily for them though, they'd win them back 3 days later, making them two-time champions. And they would finally drop the titles properly at NXT Great American Bash in July of 2022, losing them to Cora Jade and Roxanne Perez. Mandy Rose's women's title reign was quite the different story though, as she beat the likes of Cora Jade, Alba Fire, Io Shirai, Roxanne Perez, Indy Hartwell, Dakota Kai, Ivy Nile, Zoe Stark, Nikita Lyons, Thea Hale, and every single challenger laid out in front of her to retain the gold. She even beat Miko Satomura and Blair Davenport in a unification match for both the NXT and NXT UK women's belts. She was truly on top of the division. Mandy Rose would finally lose the NXT women's title to Roxanne Perez on the 13th of December 2022 episode of NXT, ending her reign at 413 days with 12 successful defenses. A true fighting champion and a great champion. But then just a day after losing the title, she was fired by the WWE. What? You see, earlier that week, photos that Mandy Rose had posted of herself on her exclusive fan site were leaked onto social media, and the story goes that the WWE saw these images and were unaware of the explicitness of what she was posting on her page, and thought the content of her site was outside of the parameters of her deal, and thus fired her. It was really a damn shame, as Mandy Rose had really come into her own as a singles worker, and losing the title made many believe she was going to return to the main roster. However, that would of course never happen, and we would never get to see that. As for Gigi Dolin, Jacy Jayne, and Toxic Attraction as a group, they would carry on for a bit with no storyline reason given as to why Mandy wasn't there, but eventually Jacy Jayne would turn on Gigi, thus ending the group for good. Jacy Jayne now is currently in the middle of a heel run in NXT, whereas Gigi Dolin is now a babyface. Mandy Rose is still out of wrestling and supposedly made a whole lot of bread from her fan site after leaving the WWE, but hopefully we can see her return in the near future, because I think she had a great run in NXT and I'd love to see her do it again on the main roster.